Okay, good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all here. Welcome to anyone who's joining us online as well. Today is our fourth day of our course, Harmony of Relationships, and we're going to be doing loving kindness meditation to get started, like we do each morning. Then afterwards, I'm going to share this topic with you of sharing the path to enlightenment, how to guide children along the path. And whether you have children or you don't, or whether you never are planning to ever have children, this topic will actually really help you because there'll probably be other people in your life from time to time that you might be interested in sharing the teachings with, and this will actually help you with that as well. Then we have a topic of how to choose wholesome friends and a life partner, because this is an important part of the path, because if you include unwholesome people into your life, this will influence you in a negative way potentially. And you like to be able to choose these individuals to be in your life without judging others and looking down on them. So I'm going to teach you how to do that, where you can choose to have wholesome people in your life without judging people, without having conceit. So we're going to start with meditation. And the way that I'm going to do meditation this morning is I'm going to do the chanting. I'm not going to guide you in the breathing mindfulness meditation part. I'm going to leave you on your own to do that. And then I'm going to come in with the loving kindness and guide you on that. And then we'll go back to the breathing mindfulness and then come out with the chanting. So this way it kind of gives you a chance to kind of do part of the meditation on your own, where you're not dependent on me to be able to do the meditation. So if you'd like to join, you can take whatever position you'd like. Like I said, I'll start with the chanting, which you guys are welcome to join in on. You're on your own with the breathing mindfulness meditation, and I'll come in with the loving kindness, and then you'll be back to your own on breathing mindfulness, and then we'll come out with the chanting. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Bhutang Bhagavanang Abhivateyami Savakato Bhagavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Iti piso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang sammuno Sakatoro kavitu Anutero purisa Dhamma sati satatawa manusarang Bhutto Bhagavati. Continuing to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. On the out breath, repeat these phrases in the mind. May I be peaceful. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be free of all discontentedness and the suffering that it causes. May Mom and Dad be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness and the suffering that it causes. May my family, friends, neighbors, and co-workers all be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May all those who have harmed me be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May all those who I have harmed be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering that it causes. May all beings, wherever they reside, be peaceful. May all beings be safe. May all beings be well. May all beings be free of discontentedness and the suffering that it causes. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมะเขวาโหตังมหาเขวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเขวัตตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเขวัตโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมอะระหะสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเขวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดัมมาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังโอโตภะคะวะติ Okay, if you'd like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, good morning to all of you guys. Nice to see everyone. Welcome to everyone online who's joining us as well. What I'm going to do before I start this topic is give you guys an opportunity to ask any and all questions that you like about meditation, because oftentimes people are building up their meditation practice. And, I taught meditation back on Tuesday, loving kindness meditation. You've had an opportunity to practice it a few times now. You might actually have questions that you like to ask, whether it's about breathing mindfulness meditation or loving kindness meditation or any other aspect of meditation that you might be needing help with. So if you'd like to ask those questions, I'll just give you guys some time here to ask any meditation questions that you'd like. Yeah, go for it. I think we had a refresh of our batteries, right?
I charged them yesterday.
Yeah, I didn't put them in, no, but we have them there.
Thank you. I think my practice it seems to be going quite well. Mm-hmm. Less and less I find my mind away. Sometimes I feel I'm on the verge of going into something which feels very nice. And I get this sense of, oh, this is really nice. An inner kind of feeling which is good. And then I get a bit scared. I think, oh my God, I'm going to go mad or something. Mm. And that's happened maybe, or many times now. The feeling of what feels good. I also think I'm going to go somewhere. I'm not going to come back.
Okay, so when you're noticing that, it's important not to get conditioned pleasant feelings, right? Because it is quite pleasurable, right? The mind's like really still, it's really quieted, almost like you're standing on the head of a needle, right? And what you do is you just notice that it's there, and you just like, okay, I see you, peacefulness over there starting to peer through the curtain, but you don't indulge in it. You just let it reside there. And yeah, there can be some fear, that the mind hasn't experienced this level of peacefulness before. That's normal. So everything you're experiencing is normal. People experience that. I experienced all those same things. But the way that you deal with it is you just keep meditating. When that peacefulness, that quietness is coming up in the mind, you just let it be there without feeling, pleasant feelings about it. And then when you have meditations that it's not there, you won't have the painful feelings too. If you get so excited or happy, for example, when it's there, when it's not there, you'll experience the sorrow. So on your way to enlightenment, you'll have some meditations that you'll be quite peaceful. The mind will be quite peaceful. And then there'll be others where the mind's shaken up a bit more. By the time you get to enlightenment, every single meditation is completely peaceful and the mind's completely joyful. But on your way there, you'll notice some are more peaceful, some are not. And it's important not to judge our meditation of good meditation or bad meditation, because this will be deflating for the mind. Instead, all meditation is beneficial. If you get to the end of your meditation and you notice that, wow, the mind's really busy today, that's actually a beneficial meditation, because you have mindfulness in that situation. You can see that your mind is quite busy. So if you're noticing that the mind is busy and you're having lots of thoughts, that's normal. Even an enlightened being will have thoughts, but they'll have quietness and stillness in between their thoughts. You'll probably have lots of thoughts in your meditation for multiple years before you'll get to the point where there's a lot of quietness and stillness in between. So what you're describing is completely normal. And if you just keep meditating over time, you'll be able to experience more and more peacefulness. There'll be elongated periods of time of peacefulness, and more frequently in your meditation sessions, you'll experience that peacefulness and joy. Mm-hmm.
Should we set an intention before we begin meditation?
You don't need to, because if you understand the goals of your meditation, like breathing mindfulness, you're working to eliminate craving, desire, attachment, cultivate mindfulness or awareness of mind and concentration. You know what the goals are. Now it's just a matter of doing it. It's a matter of like going to the gym and just lifting the weights. You already have your plan. You already know what your goal is. You just go and do it. And then the same thing with loving kindness meditation. You already know what the goals are, which is to eliminate anger, hatred, and ill will and all those lesser versions, and then cultivate loving kindness. So now that you know what the goals are, you just go in and actually execute it and just make it happen consistently over a long-term period. And that's where you really will see the results, because the mind is maturing and maturing with each individual meditation session. You're not going to see with each individual session, or even necessarily week by week, what the improvement is. But when you get kind of like 3 months and 6 months into it, it's like, whoa, you look back and you're like, wow, the mind's in such a better situation. But each day by day and each week by week, you're not going to necessarily know what the progress is. But when you accumulate enough over multiple months and years, that's where you'll see more of an accumulation of the benefits. So you don't need to set any particular intention or anything like that, because the goals are quite clear, and now it's just a matter of executing it. Yeah, you're welcome. Good morning. We're opening up to all questions about meditation. So if you'd like to ask any and all questions about meditation, we're just having a little bit of a time here to ask any questions. I'm going to check online too, see if there's any questions there. Any more questions here? No? Okay, let's see. I don't see any questions online either. Okay, so that means it's time to move into our topic for this morning, which is sharing the path to enlightenment, how to guide children along the path. This can be one of the really rewarding things. If you're cultivating wisdom and you're a parent, it can be really rewarding to share these teachings with children, because during the lifetime of the Buddha, children could get to enlightenment as early as age 7. Right? Because children have less pollution in their mind, so they actually can make progress on the path much more readily than someone who's much older, because we've had more time to accumulate pollution in our mind. So if you actually are in a position where you can help children to learn these teachings, it's wonderful for their life. If you can imagine going through life from the age of 7, never being sad, never being angry, never being frustrated or irritated or annoyed, or any of these other discontent feelings that we experience. If you can imagine that, That's what is capable. People are capable of experiencing that. I started formally training my son at age 6, and now he's almost 13. I asked him a few months ago, like, hey, what's going on with your discontentedness? I don't really see you discontent anymore. Like, how frequently do you become discontent? Because you can be internally discontent and outwardly people don't know. And he said, about every 3 months, I get annoyed, about once every 3 months. That's pretty awesome to be that age and only be getting annoyed once every 3 months. I can't imagine during that period of time of my life having experienced that. Now I understand what it would be like. But during that period of time, I had no idea that is even capable. The mind is even capable of doing that. So that's what's possible, that children can actually get to a point where they're not experiencing any discontentedness for the rest of their life. But it means that the adults that's around this child needs to be able to understand the teachings to be able to then share it with them. So I'm going to help you guys to understand how to share the teachings with a child. But keep in mind that as I share this with you, this is also going to be helpful in situations where it's not a child. Even if it's your parent or a sibling or something like this, you're going to be able to use these same things that I'm talking about here to be able to share with those people too. There's no aspect of the path to enlightenment that is about going out in the world and trying to convince other people to learn and practice these teachings. The number one priority is very clear: for you to get to enlightenment. That's the number one priority. But as you're getting closer and closer to enlightenment and you are cultivating this wisdom, there are skillful ways to help other people to learn these teachings. But you're never interested in forcing it upon someone or trying to convince them or pressure them to learn these teachings, because they'll just turn away from the teachings. I mean, think about you. Like, if somebody was trying to pressure you to do something, you'd probably resist it. It's like digging your heels into the sand. If someone was like, oh man, you got to eat this sandwich. This is the best sandwich ever. Here, let's get this sandwich. You got to eat this sandwich. You'd be like, I'm not so sure about that. Even if it looks so delicious, you probably would turn away from it because someone's putting so much pressure to try to get you to do this thing. So it's the same kind of thing with these teachings, that there's no part of this path that you go out and evangelize other people. You're not standing on the street corner, hitting a drum, holding picket signs, trying to convince people to learn and practice these teachings. But there are skillful ways to be able to share the teachings, and I'm going to help you to be able to learn how to do that. And just like always, if you guys have questions, you can ask questions, whether you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Put those in the comment section, and I'll be able to see that. If you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask questions, or here at the temple, you guys can use the microphones and ask questions as we go. Okay, so the first thing, like with all of these teachings of the Buddha, is to understand kind of getting started is just kind of setting your mind to understand what is the goal here. What are you really trying to accomplish in sharing these teachings? Well, if you think about yourself as a plant enthusiast and you're interested in growing plants, right? Because if you are a parent, that's essentially what you're doing with a child, is you're like growing a plant. So if you're the plant enthusiast and the child is the plant, the guide stake is the teachings of the Buddha. You can use the teachings of the Buddha to guide you in how to guide this child. You know, when I realized that my wife was pregnant the first time, in the first few months of pregnancy, and I realized we were going to be parents, I realized that I didn't really have good parenting growing up at all. And I thought that maybe I should go out and buy all kinds of parenting books and start reading about how to be a parent and stuff like this. And ultimately what I discovered and what I decided was, you know what? The teachings of the Buddha will guide me, because those are the same teachings that he needs. Let me just teach him the teachings of the Buddha and use the Eightfold Path as my guide. So that's what I've done, is I've just guided my son based on the teachings of the Buddha, and that's worked just fine. Because oftentimes these different parenting books out there, they have all these different conflicting things. They're all going to tell you different things, and none of it's necessarily tried and true, right? Because some of these authors, they might actually have kids, but they have very turbulent relationships with their children. They don't necessarily have harmonious relationships with their children. Here's something that's been around for 2,500 years, well vetted, well described, well understood, that actually works, because there's plenty of people that are having very healthy and wholesome relationships with their children through guiding them on this path with the teachings of the Buddha, and it actually works. And there's no conflicts in the teachings of the Buddha. There's no contradictory things that he's teaching. It's all one package. So if you think about your child as a plant and you're the plant enthusiast, the teachings of the Buddha are the guide stake, helping you to guide this plant to growing and being a very vibrant and healthy individual. So in order to accomplish that, the very first thing is that you need to acquire wisdom. If you don't have the wisdom of a parent, or as a parent of the teachings of the Buddha, you're not going to be able to guide this individual. So you need to first focus on your practice. That's the first priority, is to focus on you developing the Eightfold Path and all the other teachings of the Buddha. You're going to need to commit that teaching to memory. You're going to need to learn it multiple times using the original words of the Buddha, as we did in this course on Monday. So you're going to need the books. You're going to probably need to watch the videos or listen to the podcast. You're going to need to study the teachings. You might even need to consult with me at different times. Students sometimes sit down with me, schedule personal guidance, and it's almost like they're teaching me the Eightfold Path just to confirm that they understand it, and they're doing it from their memory. Because in order to practice these teachings, you're going to need to have them in your memory. When you're on the phone with your mom and the conversation is starting to turn towards something you'd rather it not happen, you're not going to be able to consult your book and figure out what it is you should be doing in any given situation. You're going to need to pull it from your memory. So that's why the Eightfold Path needs to be memorized. During the time of the Buddha, they memorized every teaching, right? That's the way that they were able to get to enlightenment, is they had to memorize every teaching. That's where the chanting came from, right? That they were using that to memorize the teachings. Today, we don't have to memorize every single teaching in order to get to enlightenment, but the Eightfold Path, you're going to need to memorize that. That's one of the teachings that you're going to absolutely need to memorize. So I encourage every student to be working on that in class and outside of class too. Be working on memorizing that, and that's going to help you to cultivate your wisdom. It's helpful to be sure that you keep in mind that a child is their own being. Sometimes as a parent, we want to be very controlling in our child's life. And this isn't something that's going to produce beneficial results, because that's coming from your own cravings and your own expectations. And you can translate this over to other relationships too, like I mentioned, like your parents or your siblings. Sometimes we feel like we're responsible for our parents' well-being or our siblings' well-being. And you might feel like you're trying to control these individuals or put expectations on them. And you would like to be sure you always keep in mind that everybody is their own individual being, and you're not interested in trying to pressure anybody into making any decisions any particular way. It's each individual person that needs to make decisions for themselves. And as long as you keep that in mind, then it will help you and guide you. Because while we say that, this is my son, when you might introduce somebody to your children, or this is my daughter, it's important to be sure that your mind understands they're not yours. They don't belong to you. They are their own individual beings, and they're going to need to make their own decisions. So you're kind of like a parallel process. If your child is walking forward in life like this, or your parents or your siblings or whatever, you're right alongside of them, just providing them guidance and support along the way. You're not enveloping them with everything that you know, but you're just walking right alongside of them and providing them support and guidance as they're progressing in life. And this will help you to have a wonderful mindset. The earlier that you start with teaching a child, the better. The way that I think about it is, my son was learning when he was inside the womb. My wife was meditating while she was pregnant. And a child inside the womb can actually hear and absorb things. I know this because when my son was inside the womb, I used to play mandolin. And when he came out from the womb, he recognized the mandolin. He knew what that sound was. It would help him fall asleep at night. There were times where when he wasn't even talking yet, he would actually go over to my mandolin case. He would open it up and he would bring the mandolin to me and hand it to me because he was asking me to play it. So he was familiar with the sound. He knew it because he had heard it when he was inside his mother's womb. So even though they're skin and they're inside the body, they can experience the vibration. So one of the other things you should keep in mind when a woman's pregnant and you're around this individual is that being inside the womb is absorbing what's going on the outside. So ensuring that you're not arguing, you're not being bitter and harsh and hostile and all these kinds of things is really important during pregnancy, is that you don't have that kind of thing going on. It's really helpful for the woman because her mind isn't having stress and anxiety, which is then affecting the child, but it's also good for the child itself because it's not hearing that harshness and bitterness through the outside going in. It can hear those kinds of things. So Think about training as starting early, that it's starting in the womb. With my son, as you guys heard, I started to formally teach him when he was at age 6. But there was actually things we were doing earlier than that. When he was an infant, when he was a toddler and things like this. You can know when you're around children that they're about to become discontent. They'll be playing on the floor, they'll be playing with some toy, and it'll break or something will happen, and you'll see their facial expressions. Their facial expressions will start changing, and then all of a sudden, as they change their facial expressions, then it's right? And then they start crying, right? So in that period of time where you see the facial expressions, you know that they're about to become discontent. You can actually redirect their mind. Just like I taught you guys with the Eightfold Path of right mindfulness, being aware of your mind. And then when you notice the bodily sensations that is associated with discontentedness, like the tingling of the body, the tightening of the chest, the tightening of the throat, the heat in the face, the pressure in the skull. I taught you to redirect your mind, and that's going to cut off and let go of any arising discontentedness. Your child at age 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, they don't have enough wisdom to understand the 4 foundations of mindfulness. But if you do as a parent, you can actually redirect their mind towards something else, and this will cut off and let go of their discontentedness. So my son, when he would start to become discontent, we could see it on his face and his facial expressions, and we would redirect his mind. He wasn't even able to talk yet at this time. We would say things like, wow, look at that beautiful cloud outside. Did you see that beautiful cloud? That's the most beautiful cloud I've ever seen. Or maybe there's a squirrel outside. Oh my goodness, there's a squirrel. Look at that squirrel. Because he was getting ready to get discontent, and boom, we shifted his mind and his focus to something else. So he had to cut that off. He had to cut whatever thought that was off that was arising the discontentedness, and he had to focus towards the squirrel. And then sometimes we would even grab his hand and get up and walk over to the window if it was something very significant in order to really redirect him towards that particular thing. So by the time I started training him at the age of 6, he didn't really have that much discontentedness because he was already cutting it off all the way through his childhood. So when I started teaching him the 4 foundations of mindfulness, he already understood because he was doing it from infancy. He was already cutting off and letting go of his discontentedness. So formal training can begin around 6. That's at the time where I noticed that my son was able to learn. But I've worked with some children as early as age 5. So starting early is really helpful because they actually don't have very much pollution in their mind. And just like an adult needs to start with the universal truth of impermanence, and that's the best place to start, going through the 3 universal truths and the 4 noble truths and things like this, that's the same place that a child needs to start. You're going to need to teach them differently than an adult. An adult can come to a formal training like this and sit down and learn, but you're going to hear, I'm going to talk about how you can create games and activities and fun ways to actually teach a child. That's the way that I taught my son, is through games and activities. Because at age 6, he's not going to sit down in a 1-hour discourse and listen to me talk about the 3 universal truths and the 4 noble truths and stuff like that. But there's actually games and activities that you can play with a child to teach them the same exact teachings. It's just a different method of teaching. So you'd like to start early. You can create a culture of cultivating and acquiring wisdom within your household, within your family. So my son, at different times, he would ask me questions, and of course I give him the answers if I know the answers. And there'd be questions about anything, about the world or what have you. But there were certain times where I don't know the answers, and I would tell him I don't know. Right. And I would say, let's figure out a way that we can find out this information. So when he would ask questions, instead of just like, oh, I don't know, and moving on to the next topic, I would cultivate this ability for him to understand that developing wisdom was a helpful thing for him in his day-to-day life. So we'd be driving down the road. He would ask me a question. I'd be like, I'm not really sure what the answer to that question is, but I know who does know. And he's like, who knows? And I was like, Google knows. Why don't you Google it? Because my phone was sitting right there. He was only 6 years old. So he was learning how to Google something. He was learning how to use a search engine, but he was also cultivating wisdom. So he was able to figure out what the answer was. And we've done this many, 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 many times. So now whenever my son is around, if he asks me a question and I'm like, I'm not really sure what the answer is to that, on his own, he will actually look for that information because he understands his goal in this life is to cultivate wisdom. Because if you understand the teachings of the Buddha and what the real problem is, it's the lack of wisdom. It's the ignorance, the unknowing of true reality. Even though it's craving that is causing the discontentedness, and then anger is arising because of those cravings, the only reason why craving and anger exist is because of ignorance or the lack of wisdom or the unknowing of true reality, that confusion or misperception that the mind has. So that's what you're ultimately antidoting through the teachings of the Buddha, is by arising wisdom, is to examine and investigate the teachings. So you would like to encourage children and other people around you too, even if you were a boss and you had employees and stuff like this, you would like to always encourage the cultivation of wisdom, because that's what's going to lead to more informed decisions, and it's going to lead to wholesome results or wholesome karma. So if you can create a culture of cultivating wisdom within your household, realizing that you don't know everything and that you need to guide your child in how to develop wisdom through using different resources and different sources, that can be really helpful for you and helpful for your child. So helping them to develop that wisdom is so important. Remember that you're a role model in the life of your child. And if you're going to teach your parents or your siblings, or if you have employees and you're a boss or something like this, it's the same case, right? That people are looking to you. They're looking at you in the way that you speak, in your actions, and they're learning from you every single moment. Your child at the age of 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, they can't even talk yet. They're still learning. They're watching the way that you're interacting with other people. And if you're bitter and harsh and hostile to people, they're learning that, right? If you're dismissive, if you're impolite, if you're disrespectful, they're learning from all of that. It's not just your spoken words that they're learning from. They're learning through your actions. So remember that you're always teaching people in the way that you conduct yourself. They're learning from you. So as a parent or any type of individual, if you're around your family members, you would like to be conducting yourself through these teachings, through the Eightfold Path of right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, because people are learning from that, and they're going to look to you as a role model, and then they're going to mimic your conduct. So you would like to be able to always keep in mind that they're going to be learning from you every moment. By you being respectful towards your life partner, your parents, your grandparents, your siblings, any elders or people in the community, people are learning that from you. So if you're dismissive to your parents, if you're disrespectful, if you're gossiping and slandering about your parents, you're complaining about your parents, you're teaching your children how to treat you and how to think about you, because that's what they're learning from you. They're learning about how to treat their parents through the way that you treat your parents. So your karma is that whatever you put out, that's what's going to come back to you. So if you treat your parents polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, and you think about them in that way, and your children are hearing that, they're going to treat you that particular way. But if you're degrading and diminishing and disrespectful and impolite, regularly talking about those kinds of things around your child, they're learning that from you, and that's the way they're going to treat you. So it's important to maintain your respect towards everyone in your life, because your children are absorbing that and learning that from you, and that's how they're going to treat you. Just like we were talking yesterday, is get comfortable with the struggle and allowing it to occur. Children are going to struggle because they have a lack of wisdom. They're learning about the world around them. They don't understand it yet. And I gave you guys some examples yesterday about how my son was struggling with making friends in the village, and he was making unwise choices, and me and my wife just let him do it. That's what he was interested in doing, being friends with those boys, and we just let him do it. And then he saw on his own that it wasn't turning out well for him, and then he learned that, and then ultimately he learned more wisdom of how to make better friends, and then now that's what he does. When he's around certain friends, we can see that he's making really wise choices about his friends, and we're not making the choices for him of who his friends should be. He's making those choices, but he has the wisdom to do that. If we wouldn't allow that struggle to occur early in his life, he would have never cultivated the wisdom of how to make friends. So now he knows how to make friends. So you're going to need to allow the struggle to happen and be comfortable with that, that's part of the learning process. But if you're attached to your child, when you see them struggling, you're going to experience painful feelings. You need to get over that. You need to get past that attachment and realize the struggle is part of the learning process. So get comfortable with the struggle, because that's where they're going to learn more and more wisdom. Helping a child eliminate attachment to their parents is very important, because if you allow your children to remain attached to you, they're only going to be able to be happy when they're around you. And when they're not around you, they're going to feel miserable. So helping your child eliminate their attachment to you is very important. So for example, when you come home, like say you've been away from them for maybe going to work, or maybe you've been on a business trip or something like this, you're not interested in coming home and be like, yay, daddy's home, mommy's home. Oh, wow, excited. Let's get so excited. Mommy's home, daddy's home. This is oftentimes what people tend to do with their children. And now their child gets all these conditioned pleasant feelings because, yay, mommy's home. But then when you leave or you go on a trip or you're away, they're sad. They're missing you. They feel lonely. They feel bored because their mind had these conditioned pleasant feelings when you're around. And then when you're gone, that condition is no longer present. So now their mind's going to move to the painful feelings. Parents really like that excitement. If they don't understand the path to enlightenment, they're getting those pleasant feelings too by seeing their child. And now when they're away from their child, they have painful feelings too, right? So you would like to not incentivize that. When you come to see your child, if you've been at work or you've been away for a long time on a business trip, just like, hey, little buddy, or hey, little girl, how are you? How you doing? Right? You just talk to them just like, like you're talking about the weather. It's like, no big deal. Mommy's back now. Daddy's back now. You don't have to make all this excitement and all this hoopla just because mommy or daddy has come back. And then they won't feel the sadness when you're gone, right? So sometimes when I travel, I'll be gone for several weeks. And sometimes I'll ask my son, I'll say, hey, do you miss dad? And he's like, no, I don't miss you. And I'm like, oh, great. That is wonderful, right? You might think, depending on where you are in your current understanding of what love is, you might think that it's love that causes someone to miss someone, but it's not, right? When someone's gone in our family, we don't miss them. My wife goes away to the USA sometimes for 2 months, and my son's at home just with me. He doesn't miss her, right? And this is wonderful because he enjoys when his mom's home. He really enjoys spending time with her. But when she's gone, he can still enjoy that time too. If you're attached to your parents or your children are attached to you, they can only enjoy when you're around. And when you're gone, they feel miserable. And that's not what you're interested in. You would like your child to have enjoyment and pleasure and be cheerful and glad all the time. So if you allow this attachment in your children's mind to continue to exist, they're going to experience those painful feelings. So some of the things you can do is, like I mentioned, when you come home, don't get all excited. Don't create all this hoopla when you come home. And then when you leave, don't make it feel like it's such a downer that you're leaving. Some of the things you can do is like your children can have sleepovers at other people's houses, that maybe they go to grandma's house or aunt's or uncle's house, or maybe they go to a friend's house for a period of time. And this way that they're away from you and they understand that you are impermanent and they don't always spending time with you. So helping your child eliminate their attachment to you, there's multiple things that you can do, and you would like to be able to do that from time to time. There was a time where my son used to ask me to go play basketball in the village. We have a basketball court, and I would go play basketball with him. And then we played basketball many, many times. And then one time he said, Dad, would you go play basketball with me? And I said, no, I'm not going to go play basketball. I'm going to stay home. And he said, oh, okay, I'm going to stay home too then. Right? I could see, he's attached. He initially was interested to go play basketball, but when Dad didn't go, he wouldn't go play basketball. This is how subtle the attachment is sometimes, right? So when I saw that, I was like, on the next time when he said, hey, Dad, will you go play basketball with me? I said, yeah, I'll come play basketball with you, but how about you go first, get started, and then I will come afterwards. Right? Because I needed to get his mind used to going to play basketball without me, right? So he went by himself. I waited about 10 minutes or so, and then I went and played basketball with him. And then the next time he said, hey, Dad, would you come and play basketball with me? I said, yeah, I think I might come and play. How about you go start playing without me, and then if I'm able to join you, I will join you. He said, okay. So he went on his own to the basketball court, and I never went to play with him. And he stayed out there for a good long while playing basketball. And then he came home, and he's like, hey, I thought you were going to come play basketball. I was like, yeah, I decided to stay home, but did you have fun? He's like, oh yeah, it was great having, playing basketball. I was like, excellent, great. So now you can see, you can enjoy playing basketball without dad. He's like, yeah, I can. Exactly. So then the next time he asked me to go play basketball, I said, no, I'm not going to go play basketball. He said, okay, I'm going to go play by myself. I said, perfect. Right? So he let go of his attachment. So these attachments can be really subtle to the point where he didn't want to go play basketball unless dad was playing because he didn't see it to be fun. So I needed to help him get over that he could see that, no, you can have fun playing basketball with dad, but you can also have fun without playing basketball with dad too. And that's possible. So you need to be able to spot those things because your children aren't going to necessarily always see their attachment. And you're going to need to make decisions like this that allow them to go forward in life without this attachment. You're going to need to be patient with your child, repeatedly teaching them certain things. And even if you're teaching your parents or you're teaching a sibling or an employee or something like this about any aspect of life, there's going to need to be repetitive teaching. It's very rare that a student will learn something the very first time. Extremely rare. Like the Eightfold Path. Students study that with me probably 3, 4, 5, 6 different times before they really have it in their mind. So your children are the same way. You're going to need to repeat things over and over and over. So it's going to need patience from you. Just like you need gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress, your children are exactly the same way. They're going to need that same gradual training. I can't even tell you how many times me and my son have talked about lying. This is a big thing for children. They lie, right? Well over 100, maybe even 200 or 300 times. So we've sat down and talked about lying, and I've caught him in specific lies. So I don't have the expectation that he will tell the truth. I understand that his mind is developing and there's further and further distance between his lies, where in the past they were much closer together, but occasionally he still kind of has lied here and there, right? So you need to be very patient that as you're teaching, you're going to need to sit down, you're going to need to talk. Being angry at the fact that they lied isn't helping the situation. It's just going to motivate harsh speech coming from your mind. And now your child is learning that whenever they do something that's unwise, you're harsh and bitter and hostile with them. That's not the type of relationship that you would like to create with your child, that when they do something unwise, you're harsh and bitter and hostile with them. Because then they're going to start hiding more and more of the things that they're doing that are unwise. You would like to teach them that being unwise is part of growing up as a child, but becoming wiser is part of growing up and being a child too, that it's okay that they've made this unwise decision. Now let's just talk about it, figure out how to make this decision better in the future, and make sure that you have the wisdom that they need in order to be able to make that wiser decision in the future. So rather than degrading or diminishing or being harsh and bitter and hostile with them, just talk with them about their decisions. You're always talking about their decisions, not them as a person, but their decisions, and being patient with this gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. You're going to need to be creative and have fun, because that's the way children learn. When I first introduced my son to the path to enlightenment and I started teaching him formally, what we did is I talked to him for maybe like a minute or two about the universal truth of impermanence. And then we went outside in the village on a scavenger hunt. You know what a scavenger hunt is, right? Where it's like a little fun game where you're going around looking for stuff. So I taught him about impermanence, and then I said, hey, let's go out in the village and try to see if we can find something that is permanent. So we went around the village and he was trying to find things that are permanent, and he would point out a couple of things that he thought was permanent, but then I would talk him through it and help him realize that they weren't permanent, right? And then we switched it. And then we said, okay, now let's find things that are impermanent, right? So he was walking through the village and he's like, hey, look, there's some green leaves in the tree and then there's brown ones on the ground. That's impermanence. I'm like, yeah, you got it, high five. And then he saw like a crack in the sidewalk and he's like, that's impermanence. It's like, yeah, you're right. And then he saw a fence that had paint on it and the paint was fading. And he was like, that's impermanence, right? So we started going around the village having this fun activity to be able to point out impermanence. And we probably stayed outside for a good 30 minutes to an hour doing this. So we had a really good time. And then every other teaching after that, I just tried to figure out some little game that he could learn and play that would help him to learn the teachings. And that's the way to teach a child, is through games and fun activities. And it's important not to force them, as I mentioned, that you'd like to be welcoming and inviting. You're not interested in forcing your child to meditate or forcing them to learn or anything like that, but invite them to go out and do these kinds of things. And then if they're not interested, just be understanding of that right now they're not interested to learn, but maybe later they will be. So take your time, be patient, and not forcing them. You're going to need to start small and build from there. When I started with my son at age 6 and I realized I needed to teach this child the path to enlightenment, I didn't even know if he would actually listen to what I had to share. So I started really small. I was sitting on a sofa and he was sitting down on the floor next to me. And I asked him, I said, Bailan, can you hand me the remote control to the TV? Because I'd never even said that to him before. I never even asked my son anything because he was 6 years old. I was being dad, doing everything for him. So I was like, I wonder if this kid will even listen to me and actually do what I say, right? And I was like, will you hand me that remote control? And he's like, sure, Dad, here you go. And he handed me a remote. And I was like, okay, this kid listens to me. And then he kind of got up and he went into the kitchen to get a glass of water. And I said, Bailan, can you bring Dad a glass of water? I wasn't even thirsty. I was like, can you bring me a glass of water? He's like, sure, Dad, I can do that for you. And he got me a glass of water and he brought it to me. And I was like, thank you so much. So I started noticing, okay, he'll listen to me. He'll kind of like do the things that we're talking about. So that was me kind of starting to actually teach him with those very simple, very basic things, just to see if he was interested in listening to what I had to say. And then we just built from there. So you're going to need to start small and then build. Don't give them too much too quick, but just give them little tiny lessons here and there. There were times where me and my son would be driving down the street and I would give him a little 30-second lesson here or there, or a 1-minute thing here or there. This is the way kids learn. So we'd be driving down the street. He would see like a dead animal on the side of the street. And he'd be like, Dad, there's a dead dog on the side of the street. And I'd say, oh, really? What is that? He's like, oh, that's impermanence, that we can't live forever. Because we were born, we had to die. And I was like, oh, you're right. Yeah, that's exactly what that is. Because I had taught him that previously, right? So there was these little lessons along the way. Get comfortable with mistakes. You're going to make mistakes along the way as you're teaching people. You're going to need to get comfortable with that. There were times where I would like come up with certain games that I was interested in playing, and I thought this would communicate the teachings really well. We would be 3 to 5 minutes into the game, and I realized it wasn't actually working the way that I envisioned it in my mind, and I just changed gears and we changed and did something else. So be ready for mistakes, your mistakes, and then also their mistakes too. It's through trial and error that you're going to be able to share the teachings and actually help someone to be able to learn the teachings. So there's 2 different ways of actually teaching. There's something called proactive teaching, and then there's real-time training. Okay, what proactive teaching is where, like, I went to my son and I started teaching him about the universal truth of impermanence, and we went outside and we did a scavenger hunt, and he was learning all about impermanence. And then shortly after that, I started teaching him about the Four Noble Truths and how craving, desire, attachment leads to discontentedness and things of this nature. This is proactive training, helping him to get wisdom on board. But then there was real-time training too. There were times where he was discontent, and I needed to step in and help him to be able to see a certain lesson. And sometimes I actually created those situations intentionally. There were times when he was first learning that he used to play Legos a lot. This is a common thing for children to play Legos. And he would spend all this time putting together some Lego model. And then he would go to school. And when he was at school, I would break up his Legos and I would lay them on the living room floor, because I knew that when he came home, he would see that on the living room floor, and this would be some impermanence that he had to deal with, because I already did the proactive training with him, teaching him the universal truth of impermanence and teaching him the Four Noble Truths, and that craving permanence will lead to discontentedness. So now when he came home and he saw that the Legos were all broken up, the very first time he started crying and he was very upset that his Legos were broken up, right? So then I got down on the floor with him and I was like, what's going on, Bailan? What's happening? He was like, oh, my Legos, I put them together, now they're broken up. He was like so upset. And I was like, well, Bailan, I was like, what is it that causes discontentedness? He was like, oh, my Legos are broken. I was like, yeah, I know they're broken, but let's calm down. What is it that's causing your mind to be discontent? This is the real-time training, right? And finally he was like, it's craving, because of craving permanence. And I was like, yeah, exactly. So what is your mind craving to be permanent here? He's like, I'm craving for my Legos to be permanent, and they're not permanent. I was like, well, have you found anything in the world that is permanent? And he's like, no, I haven't found anything. I was like, okay, so your Legos are impermanent. And I was like, just like they were together and that's impermanent, being apart is impermanent too. You could actually put them back together. And he was like, yeah, you're right. And he calmed down and he started putting them back together, right? So then I waited about 4 or 5 days, and then I broke up his Legos again. And he came home from school and he saw his Legos and he started crying for about maybe 15 seconds, 30 seconds. And then he stopped crying and he put them back together on his own. I didn't have to even teach him anything. And then he went to school again. And, about 4 or 5 days later, I broke up his Legos again. And then he came home from school and he looked at his Legos and he looked at me and he looked at his Legos and looked at me. He said, you broke up my Legos, didn't you? I was like, yep, I sure did. He's like, all right, I'm just going to put them back together. No crying, no nothing, no upset. He just put them back together because he had let go of that attachment, right? So the process of helping your child to get to peace and joy, they're going to have to walk through painful feelings. That's why it's important for you to not be attached to your child. So if I would have never broke up those Legos like that, he would have never been able to get over that attachment. But having done that for 3 times, I was able to see that his mind ultimately eliminated his attachment because he ultimately came home on that 3rd time and he wasn't discontent. And I knew that he had let go of his attachment, right? So this is the type of thing that you're going to need to do is proactive training to actively teach them ahead of time so they have the wisdom on board. But then in real time training, you're going to need to actually teach them in real time as well. So this is the way to train proactively, but then in real time training as well. So there's more to share with you here, but I'm going to pause and see if you guys have any questions on anything I've been sharing so far. Do you guys have anything you'd like to ask? No questions? Okay. Let me see if we have anything online. Hello to everyone online. Okay. I don't see any questions there either. Okay. So now, be prepared for detours, right? There's going to be detours where you're headed towards something. You're going to be doing something as a family, and there's going to be something that happens and you're going to need to stop what you're doing, teach a little bit of a lesson before you move on to the next thing. So I'll give you an example. Let's just say you are getting your kids ready to go to school and they're putting on their shoes, they're putting on their jackets, they're getting their books ready for school, and maybe your kids start being upset and angry with each other. And you're on your way to school and you would like to get to school on time, but now they're angry and they're starting to be bitter and harsh and hostile with each other. It doesn't make sense to just keep on going. Because the goal is to not just get to school on time. The goal is to get there with a peaceful and joyful mind. So if you need to call a timeout and now start talking to them about right speech, for example, and help them to see that they're not speaking gently, that they're being harshly, you're going to need to be needing to be willing to do that. Call a timeout. Or say you're on your way to a party, maybe a birthday party. One of your friends have a birthday party and you're really looking forward to going there. Maybe your kids are looking forward to going there too. And if something's happening along the way, rather than just racing to hurry up and get there on time, be willing to pause and teach what you need to teach in order for your child to know and understand that particular thing before you move on to the actual event. Right? The goal here is for your child to cultivate wisdom, not just get to the birthday party. They need to cultivate wisdom so that they can go there joyfully and peacefully. There were times where me and my son we were on our way to go play miniature golf. This is something that he used to like to do. And I used to take him to go play miniature golf. And we used to go many different times. And after about 3, 4, 5 times of going to play miniature golf, one time we were on our way to go play miniature golf. And I was like, hey, this is going to be really great to go play miniature golf. And my son, he was about age 8 or 9 at this time. He started speaking a bunch of arrogant things. His ego came up. He was like, yeah, I'm going to beat you. I'm going to do this. I'm going to walk all over you. I'm going to like do this, that, or the other thing. I forget his exact words about what he was saying, but all of his ego was coming up and saying how he was going to beat me and he was going to do this, that, and the other thing. And I was like, oh, really? I was like, so that's the way you're approaching this? He's like, yeah, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this and you're going to score this and I'm going to score that. And, you're going to be crying in the corner when I'm done with you and all these kinds of things, right? And I was like, if that's the case, I'm not interested in playing miniature golf with you. I think we'll just turn around and go home. And he was like, no, I'm going to beat you. We got to go play. I'm going to beat you. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I was like, yeah, I definitely don't want to play miniature golf with you. I'm just going to turn around and go home. So even though I was interested in playing miniature golf and it's really funny or really fun, what was important is that he learned that people aren't going to be interested in playing with you when you have ego and you have arrogance. So I needed to teach him this lesson and we needed to take a detour. I turned around. I was calm. I wasn't upset. I wasn't angry because I didn't have a craving to play miniature golf. So I just took a U-turn and we went back home and he didn't play miniature golf that day. Right. And what he learned from that is, wow, if I have ego, if I have arrogance, if I talk smack to people, they're not going to be interested in playing with me. So I need to get rid of that. So then in the future, when we went to go play miniature golf, he didn't do that anymore. He started to be nice and polite and kind and friendly and warm and gentle in the way to go and play miniature golf. So you're going to need to be ready for detours because these things are going to occur. If you're craving to go to the birthday party, if you're craving to go play miniature golf, you won't be willing to take these detours. So you're going to need to make sure that you don't have craving to go do these things. And keep in mind what the goal for your child is to cultivate wisdom, not just get to the birthday party, not just get to the miniature golf course, but to cultivate wisdom, to do it with peacefulness and joy in the mind and doing it in a harmonious way with others. It's important to always be supportive and encouraging, being polite, kind, friendly, respectful with your children. Again, talking about their decisions that they're making as being unwise, not degrading them as a person. If you're degrading and diminishing your child as a person, this is going to affect their mind. Whereas if you're talking about their decisions and that you think that they could make some better decisions in a certain situation, this can be more encouraging and supportive. You're going to need to eliminate any anger and aggressiveness within your own mind. So you still need to practice the 5 factors of well-spoken speech and all the other teachings of the Buddha. Because remember, the Buddha teaches you to speak at the proper time. What you say is true, gentle, beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness. So if your mind is angry and frustrated or having aggression based on something that's going on with your family, it's not the proper time to be teaching your child. You need to step away, calm your mind down, wait a few hours, wait a few days, and then teach the lesson that you need to teach. You shouldn't be speaking and trying to teach when you're angry and frustrated and agitated, because that's what's going to come through. You would like to guide your child at a time when your mind is calm and peaceful. The Buddha talks about harsh speech and firm speech in his teachings. He talks about eliminating harsh speech. Harsh speech would be like your tone, your tempo, and your word choice is harsh and bitter and hostile. You need to eliminate that out of your speech with all people. But when it comes to guiding children, you could speak firm, where you firm up your tone a little bit. Your word choice is the same, right? But you're just going to firm up your tone a little bit and maybe even your tempo. The Buddha talks about this, that when he was teaching his students, he would sometimes talk firm with them. But during the lifetime of the Buddha, he taught his students when they would come live with him, and he was almost like their adopted father. I would never talk firm with a student. Nowadays, we don't talk that way. But with a child, with my son, I do speak firm with him occasionally, but there's no harshness, there's no anger, there's no hostility behind it. So for example, if my son is learning about lying, initially, the first 4, 5, 6, 8 times maybe that I'm teaching him, I'm just guiding him nice and gentle, trying to help him to understand, like, hey, Bailan, it's unwise for you to lie. And here's the reasons why. And here's how it's going to affect you, right? Just kind of helping him and saying, you really shouldn't be lying. This is really unwise, right? And I might talk to him like that. But over time, if he's not paying attention and I need to grab his attention to really help him focus on what it is that I'm sharing, I might firm up my speech. Where before I might have said, Bailan, it's really unwise if you lie. right? Now with firm speech, it might be, Bailan, it's really unwise if you lie. This isn't going to work out well for you, right? Just kind of firm it up a little bit, right? There's no harshness behind it. There's no anger, hostility. It's just a little bit firmed up. And sometimes this will help get the attention of the child and they'll take it more seriously. And my son is about the only person that I've ever done this with. I've done it with my wife very rarely, but I don't even really do it with her. Now she's at the point where she doesn't really need any more guidance or training on the path to enlightenment. But my son, he still has needed some training from time to time. So I would do this with him, but with no one else. I would never do this with an actual student. So firm speech is something that you can use with a child, but you need to make sure that you don't have any anger or aggressiveness behind it, that there's no harshness whatsoever. It's important to remember that what you're doing is imparting wisdom because you are impermanent in your child's life. They need the wisdom to be able to make decisions on their own. That as they're going forward in life, you are absolutely impermanent. That they're going to move out of your house one day. They're going to have other relationships. They're going to be in business. They're going to learn about this natural law of karma in one way or another. And they're either going to learn it from you or they're going to learn it from the outside world, right? At some point, if they didn't learn about the natural law of karma, they might get involved with the police. They might get involved where they have a boss who fires them. They might have coworkers that reject them and aren't interested in spending time with them. They're going to be able to see that their unwise decisions are leading to these unwholesome results. But the more of this wisdom that you can impart early in their life, the less and less of those kinds of experiences that they will have, right? So I don't know if you guys know, but my son does a little bit of editing on the podcast that I do. I have 3 podcast episodes that I do every week, and my son edits one of them. And I treat it as if he's almost like an employee, that he has a certain timeline. He has to get his podcast to me by Friday at 9 p.m. And that's his deadline, just like a work or a boss would have a deadline. And if he gets it in late, there's consequences that he has to deal with. And at one point, he was getting in late every single time. And I was warning him about this. And then eventually, he was doing it so many times, I told him that he was fired. And I fired him from his job, right? Because at some point, he might get fired in the future from some job. And now he's going to have that experience of having been fired from his job. So I fired him for like 4 weeks or 5 weeks. He wasn't doing the podcast, right? And then eventually I went to him and I said, hey, if you'd like your job back, I'm willing to give you your job back, but you're going to need to commit to me that you're going to pay attention to this and get your work done on time. So he agreed and then, kind of helped them and things like this. So there's things like this that you can do with your children in order to have them experience what they need to experience. Because there's part of that is helping them to impart wisdom. Or sometimes a parent might be like, oh, I can't imagine firing my child. They're going to be so upset. Yeah, exactly. Right. And now they're going to need to deal with that. They're going to need to get over that, experience it. And now they're more comfortable with it. Whereas if you keep them in this little shell, in this little bubble, and they never experience any of these hardships, they don't ever know how to deal with it. And they go out into the world without the wisdom of how to deal with it. So you would like to impart wisdom and even create situations where they have the opportunity to cultivate this wisdom. As I was sharing, you're going to need to do little mini lessons and repeated tasks over and over and over again. Even just driving down the street, 30 seconds here, 1 minute there, you can give them a little mini lesson. You can use the Eightfold Path as your guide. This is a great, excellent way to guide anybody because every individual who's going to experience an improved way of life or an improved mind, they're going to need to know the Eightfold Path. So guiding them in the Eightfold Path is going to be helpful. And then teaching children life skills is really important because yes, they need to know the Eightfold Path and they need to know the path to enlightenment, but they're going to need to know how to do laundry, how to cook, how to iron, how to clean a toilet. They're going to need to know these kinds of things. So remember that your goal as a parent in imparting wisdom and teaching them wisdom is yes, teaching them about the path to enlightenment, but also teaching them life skills that are going to help them in day-to-day life. I can still remember at age 9, my mom teaching me how to iron. I remember her describing each little aspect of the shirt and how to iron because that's the kind of work that she did for a period of time. So she knew all these different pieces of the garment, and she was explaining to me, you're supposed to iron this first and this second and this third and this fourth. I can still remember it at age 9 when she was teaching me this, right? So these are skills that you can use. So when I was single and I needed to iron my own clothes, I knew how to do it because my mom had taught me growing up. So your children are going to need other skills beyond just the path to enlightenment and how to meditate and things like this. So teaching them life skills will be very important. It's helpful to not punish your children. Sometimes this is the way we've been brought up, that we were punished, and we might think that this is the way that we should function too. Back in the old days, people would beat their children, and there's probably still parents that are doing that today, hitting their children. But that was very commonplace to literally beat your child quite extensively. And our parents might have learned that from their parents. So they might have done that to us, where they beat us. And now growing up, and we can see what that actually did, is it produced a lot of fear and resentment in our mind towards our parents. We can understand that, hey, even though our parents did that to us, that's unwise. It's an unwise way to raise a child. Beating a child doesn't teach them anything. It doesn't give them any wisdom. All it does is makes them resentful towards their parents. And if you beat your children, this isn't going to promote improved decision making. It's just going to teach them to fear you and have resentment. So you're not interested in punishing your child, not with beating, but even with things like, like I remember growing up as a child, I was sent to bed at night without any food as part of my punishment. If I had done something during the day, or if I did something at the dinner table, I was sent to bed with no food. And I would sit there and cry and be upset because my stomach was hurting so bad and I couldn't even fall asleep at night. And this was part of my punishment for having done something unwise. And I never learned the lesson of what I needed to do better. I just sat there and dealt with the pain, and that's what I was dealing with the whole time, right? So punishing a child doesn't actually give them any wisdom. My parents didn't talk to me and explain to me what it is that I did that was unwise and how I can do that better. And that's what you would like to be able to do, is you'd like to impart wisdom and not punishing your child. But there might be certain times where you need to get your children's attention. So there are times where my son has done something unwise. Let's just use the lying, for example. And we might have talked about it 4, 5, 6, 8 different times, where he sat down and talked about how unwise it was, but he's still lying. So now what I might do is I might say, you know what, Bailan, do you understand that lying is unwise? Say, yes, I understand. Is there anything about lying that you don't understand? Nope, Dad, you've explained it all to me 100%. Okay, so you understand that you need to tell the truth. Yep, sure do, Dad. Okay, so if you lie again, Dad's going to need to do something in order to get your attention, so you know how serious this is. And he's like, well, what are you thinking about? And I was like, well, I think you need to go away from your video games for a period of time, right? And he's like, oh, you mean the video games? But, what am I going to do if I don't play video games? I don't know. You're going to need to find something else. Maybe read a book or play with your Legos or something else. But I think there needs to be something that you agree to, that you give up, so that you understand how serious it is not to lie. And he's like, all right, Dad, I agree. I should give up my PlayStation if I lie next. And I'm like, okay, how long do you think you should give it up for? And he's like, maybe one day. And I was like, I think it needs to be longer than that, right? Can you come up with an answer that's maybe longer than that? And they might say, okay, 30 days. And I'm like, maybe that's too long. Maybe someday you might have to do that, but maybe something in between. He's like, all right, how about 5 days, Dad? And I was like, yeah, that sounds reasonable. How about you give up your PlayStation for 5 days if you lie again? He's like, all right, perfect. I agree, right? So now he's come up with this consequence that he's going to experience if he lies again. And he has that in his mind. So it's not me punishing him. It's him accepting the consequences and realizing that he needs to now experience this consequence if he lies again. So then when he lied again, because he surely did, he understood exactly what was going to happen. He brought me his PlayStation controllers. He said, here, Dad, these are for you. I lied. I'm not going to be able to play for 5 days. right? So I didn't punish him. I was guiding him towards wise decision making and showing him how to do this. So you might need to do these kinds of things in order to get their attention, but you shouldn't think of it as a punishment. You should think about it as a consequence and as a way to bring to their attention how serious this particular topic is that you're teaching them. You can also reward good conduct. Rather than punishing a child and constantly telling them all the unwise things they did and punishing them, instead, if you reward good conduct, you're going to see that your children are going to be more likely to repeat that. So me and my son talk much more about all the wise things that he's doing than the unwise things, especially early on, because he was doing a lot of unwise things early on. So 98% of the time, I was giving him high fives for things that he was doing well. So there are times when I was teaching him how to speak with right speech with his mom, because he would be harsh and bitter and hostile with his mom, sometimes even disrespectful. So as I was teaching him about this, and I would see him talking nicely and kindly with his mom, I would say, Bailan, you just talked really nice with your mom. That is absolutely wonderful. Dad's really pleased to see that. You're really learning. He's like, yeah, Dad, that's really great. I was like, doesn't it feel better to have that kind of conversation with your mom? Yeah, it feels so much better. I was like, excellent. You know what? I know you've been interested in getting some ice cream. How about we walk to 7-Eleven and kind of celebrate that you're doing better with this speech? He's like, all right, Dad. So we have a 7-Eleven right out in front of our village. So we just walk to 7-Eleven, get a little ice cream, right? I probably would have bought him ice cream at some point anyway. Might as well connect it to his good decision-making, his wise decision-making to talk nice with his mom. So now let's go get an ice cream, right? And we don't do that every single time because then his mind would have gotten attached to it. But reward that positive conduct, reward that good conduct, because you'll spend much less time having to talk about the unwise stuff when you're rewarding the good, wholesome moral conduct, the good, wise decision making. So if you focus on the positive or accentuate or emphasize the positive, you'll spend much less time talking about the unwholesome things or unwise things that they're doing because you're emphasizing the positive, and they're going to be more likely to actually repeat that. And remember that part of you emphasizing the positive, it doesn't have to be buying an ice cream. It can be a hug. It can be a little kiss on the cheek. It can be a little rub on top of the head. These are also rewards for good conduct as well, or even your words. When you're working with a child, don't assume that you know the full story. There are situations where my son would go to school and he would come home and he would tell me a certain thing. And I got a certain amount of the story, but I also needed to talk to the teacher, and I also needed to talk to the other children involved to find out the full story. So it's important that you know that the children, not because they're necessarily lying or not because they're necessarily trying to hide anything from you, but they just don't remember the whole story and they're only telling you the part that they remember. So before you make any decisions to guide your children, especially young children that are under like 10 or 12 years old, it's important that you get the full story from everybody involved, that you don't just assume that you know the full story. This is called clinging to your perceptions. If you talk to one person and you form a certain opinion just talking to one person, you could be clinging to a perception, which may or may not actually be true. So you need to make sure that you have the full story before you make any decisions about your child. This last one on our screen is, let me see. Oh, okay. So down here at the bottom, I talk about location and position is important. Okay, what I mean by this is that when you're talking with your child, the place where they sit is very important. That when I talk with my son about something very important that he really needs to understand, I sit on the sofa or sit in a chair and he sits on the floor in front of me because his mind's going to absorb what I have to say more readily that way. You know, most of the time we're just sitting on the sofa together or we're sitting at the table together. But when I was teaching him very deeply and I knew that he needed to take in certain information, I would have him sit on the floor in front of me because this positioning is really important for his mind to digest what it is that I have to share. So sometimes I would say, hey, Bailan, I have something really important that I need to talk with you about. And he might come over and he might sit on the sofa next to me. And I would say, son, can you sit on the floor while I talk to you? I need to have you sit on the floor. And he would say, okay, Dad. And he would sit on the floor. And now he would be more focused to understand what it is I have to say. And after I did this a few times, he started learning that this is the way Dad would teach him. So then over time, I would say, hey, Bailan, Dad has something really important that I need to talk with you about. Can you come over here and talk with me? And he would automatically come over and sit on the floor, because he just knew that that's what was important to do. And then I was able to more easily teach him. So the position, not that you're above your children, not that you're more important than your children, but yeah, it's just helping them to absorb the information. By them sitting on the floor, it'll make it easier for them to absorb the information. Okay? It's important to remember that you can be friendly with your child, but you're not their friend. Friends function very differently than parents. Sometimes parents think that the way to be a good parent is to be your child's best friend. You'll hear parents talk about this. They'll say that their children are their best friends, or they'll say, I am my child's best friend. You are their parent, and a parent does things very differently than a friend. And if you give up that parent role and you mix yourself in with just being a friend, and that's the perception that you form in your child's mind, and you allow your child to perform or form that perception, you're giving up that all-important role of being their parent. You need to maintain this role, because this role is very different than a friend. They're going to have plenty of friends. They're going to have friends that come and go. They're going to have best friends, and they're going to have different best friends. And those people are going to come and go in and out of their life. But you're consistent in their life, and you're a very important individual in their life to guide them. So it's important to maintain that role as a parent and don't see yourself as their friend. So you can be friendly with your child, but your child's going to need friends, and they're going to function very differently in their life than their parent. So don't be so quick to give up that role. Ensure that your child understands true love, which we were talking about yesterday, because sometimes children don't understand this. My son, one time we were driving down the street, he said to me, he said, Dad, I don't think Mom loves me. And I said, really? Why do you say that? He's like, I don't know. I just don't think she loves me. And I was like, okay. Well, what does love mean? And he's like, I don't know. What is love? And I was like, well, how do you know that your mom doesn't love you if you don't even know what love is? He was like, I don't know. I just don't think she loves me. And I was like, all right, well, let's start. Let's talk about what is love. So I taught him what is love. And I explained it the way that we taught yesterday in class. So then I started asking him questions. And I said, would somebody who loves you do your laundry? And he said, yeah, they would. And I said, if somebody loves you, would they cook for you? And he's like, yeah. And I said, if somebody loves you, would they give you hugs and kisses? And he said, yeah. And I said, if somebody loves you, would they come and tuck you in at night and help you to go to sleep at night? He's like, yeah. And I was like, well, isn't that the stuff that your mom does? And he's like, yeah, that's what she does. And I was like, okay, so does your mom love you or not? He's like, yeah, Mom loves me. Because first he understood what love was, with love without attachment and unconditional love. But then I started assigning it and kind of talking about certain actions, because that's where you can see somebody's love is through their actions, right? So then he was able to see that his mom actually loves him, right? So you're going to need to talk to your child and help them to understand what love is. And communicating love through speech is important, but it's through actions that someone's going to really be able to see love. So be sure your actions are communicating love. And if you have multiple children, it's important that you treat all your children equally and you love them all equally. If you treat one child one way and another child a different way, it's not going to go well for you in the household. You need to treat all of them equally. I think you had a question, right? Did you have a question? No, you're good? Okay. All right. So if you have shared custody with a child, because sometimes parents have children and then the parents separate, and now you might have the children for a period of time and your ex-partner has the children for a period of time. It's important to understand that if you're teaching your children these teachings and then they go away to your ex-partner's house who may not be teaching them these teachings, when they come home, they're going to have regressed. during that period of time. Because maybe for 3 days, 5 days, 2 weeks, they're at your ex-partner's house and they're not learning these teachings, and they're not practicing these teachings perhaps when they're at your ex-partner's house. So when they come home, they're not going to be right back where they started from when they actually left. So it's important for you to keep that in mind, that there's going to be some regression, and just know that that's the case. You don't need to be angry. You don't need to crave or long or yearn for them to be at the exact same place they were when they left. Just understand that they're going to regress, and you're going to need to make some adjustments when they come back. Your children can be influenced by others, not just your ex-partner, but their friends. I noticed when my son would go to school that there was one particular school, this group of friends that he had, that there was a lot of ego. And he would come home, whenever he came home from school, he would always have a little bit of ego for the first 30 minutes or an hour after school, until I started pointing it out to him and showing him that his ego was rising up. So your children can be influenced either positively or negatively by the people around them. And they're going to start picking these things up when they go to school and in their friend group, but even from your ex-partner. And if your ex-partner has a new partner, they can pick those things up from them. Or maybe that partner has children themselves and they're interacting with those children in another neighborhood. So your children can be influenced by others. So when you're spending time with your children, you can observe that and then just help them to understand that they don't need to be influenced. Because that was one of the things that I shared with my son, is helped him to be able to see that his mind was being influenced by this ego that he was having in his own mind, and he was picking it up at school. And then when he was coming home, he was having more ego than when he went to school. And then he started noticing it more frequently, and he stopped allowing his mind to be influenced by that. We already talked about this excitement. You're going to need to help your children understand the difference between excitement and enjoyment. Excitement is a conditioned pleasant feeling. And if you're incentivizing excitement, that's going to lead ultimately to painful feelings, because if they get the conditioned pleasant feeling, they're going to get the painful one. So you need to teach your child how to enjoy something without excitement. This is something that the unenlightened mind doesn't know how to do. So you're going to need to know how to do that first, and then you can teach your children how to enjoy something without conditioned pleasant feelings. This might sound very odd to some of you guys, but you can learn how to do this, where you can enjoy something without conditioned pleasant feelings. And then just like other beings function through a praise and reward system, you will notice that your child will respond to a praise and reward system too. So my son used to get certain things when he would make certain wise decisions. So sometimes we'd be at 7-Eleven. He'd be like, "Hey, Dad, can I get a bag of Doritos?" And I would say, let me think for a second. You just got your report card last week. You've got pretty good grades. I've been noticing that you've been treating your mom better. You took out the trash recently. Like, yeah, you can get a bag of potato chips or Doritos or whatever. I would have bought it for him anyway, but I'm connecting it to his decision making, help him to see that by him making wise decisions, he's more likely to have these things happen for him. So you can praise your children and reward your children, and remember that part of that reward is the hugs, the kisses, the rubs on the heads, and things like that. That's going to show them like, hey, you're making some wise decisions here. Okay, any questions on anything that I shared here on this topic? I know some of you guys don't have kids, and you might not even be interested in having kids. The question?
Isn't this conditioning? Praising and rewarding? Is any conditioning? Is any giving?
No, because when you praise someone, you can teach them not to get pleasant feelings from your praise. This is something that the unenlightened mind will do. When you praise or when you receive praise, you'll get conditioned pleasant feelings. But you need to teach and train your child to not get those conditioned pleasant feelings just because someone's praising you. This is part of the teachings of the Buddha too. Because if you can imagine a Buddha, people are praising that person all the time. Thank you so much for these teachings. They've been so impactful for my life. My relationships are going so much better. You know, people praise me all the time. They tell me how wonderful they think I am as a teacher. My mind's unaffected. I don't get conditioned pleasant feelings. It's nice to hear. I'm appreciative that they value what I'm doing, but I don't get pleasant feelings. Because then when someone tells me I'm the most horrible teacher they've ever had, I don't get painful feelings from that either, right? So you need to be able to teach your child how to receive praise without conditioned pleasant feelings, because it's not the praise that's producing the conditioned pleasant feelings. It's their craving within their mind. So if you help them to get rid of those cravings, they'll learn how to receive praise without getting conditioned pleasant feelings. And one of the ways that I did this is like, say, like my son came home with a really good grade on something. I might say something like, hey, Bailan, you got a really good grade on this paper, this assignment, this project at school. He's like, yeah, Dad, I did. Thanks for noticing. And I was like, I bet you must feel so excited inside. Like you're the best student in the whole class, right? Because you're like got this really good grade. You're like better than everybody, right? And he's like, no, Dad, I don't think that way. And I was like, oh, perfect, son. So you're not so excited just because you got a good grade? He's like, no. He's like, I did a good job. I worked. I did what I needed to do. It's wonderful that I get a good grade, but I don't need to be excited about it. I was like, all right, perfect, son. That's exactly the way to think about it, that you did a good job, you're pleased with the grade, but you don't have to get all excited and emotional about it just because you got this good grade. So sometimes I would try to like send his mind in the direction of excitement or arrogance or pride or ego. And it was up to him to understand to bring his mind to the middle and not allow the mind to do that. So I had taught him already about conceit and not allowing his mind to have conditioned pleasant feelings. So then when I tried to incentivize his mind to go in that direction, he wouldn't go in that direction. He would stay in the middle. So the praise isn't the problem.
The receiving of it is.
The receiving of it's not either. It's if you have a craving for the praise, and now when you get the praise, you get excited. That's the problem. The excitement is the problem. The cause of it is the craving, desire, attachment. So people are going to praise you. The more enlightened you become, people are going to tell you how wholesome of a person you are, how polite you are, how respectful you are, how kind you are. You're going to hear praise all the time. You can't control what other people say to you. All you can do is control your own mind to not allow it to get those conditioned pleasant feelings when you hear the praise.
Can you go back one slide? Yes. One more. Yeah, rewarding good conduct. Emphasizing, highlighting positive over negative. How to handle the negative?
That's where you have discussions. You talk.
Discussions.
You sit down and you talk, right? And you're not interested in doing it when you're angry or you're frustrated. So if you need to calm your mind down first, whether it's a couple hours or a couple days, do that. Make sure your mind's well. Make sure it's nice and calm before you sit down, and you have a real clear approach. And one of the best ways to teach is to ask questions, like, "Son, why did you do this?" "I don't know. I just did it." "So you didn't think before you did it?" "No, I didn't." "Okay, well, Dad would like you to start thinking more about the decisions that you're making. Just choosing to bite that little girl," my son did this one time, "to bite that little girl's finger was really unwise. That's not something that is going to produce beneficial results for you. If I bit your finger, how would you feel about that?" "Oh, I wouldn't like it at all." "Would it hurt?" "Yeah, it would hurt, Dad. And maybe you need to go to the hospital, right?" "Yeah." "So is that what you would like other people to experience?" "No." "Okay, so are you planning to bite anybody in the future?" "No, I'm not going to bite anyone else in the future." "Okay, great. So we don't bite people. You've learned that now, right?" "Yep, I sure have." "Okay, so now that you've created this situation with this little girl at school, how are we going to clean this up? Because now she might have some feelings in her mind where she's resentful towards you, and she doesn't realize that her own mind is causing that. So how can we clean this up?" He's like, "I don't know, Dad. What do you suggest?" I was like, "How about if we go to the store and we buy her some flowers? Why don't we buy her some flowers, and you can take them to school tomorrow and give her some flowers and apologize to her? What do you think about that?" "Okay, Dad, let's do that." "Okay, we'll take you to the flower shop in the morning. You can buy her a little flower, and then you can take it to school and you can apologize for what you've done." He's like, "All right, perfect, Dad. And that'll clean it up?" And I was like, "Yeah, that'll clean it up for you." I was like, "All right." So that's what he did, right, in that situation. So he's learning what is the unwise decision, what is the wise decision, and now how do we clean this up now that you've done this particular thing. And this is a great skill because he did other things too in the future that he made unwise decisions, and we use that same model every single time. Let's talk about the unwise, let's talk about the wise, and now let's talk about how to clean it up. And usually it involves some amount of generosity and apologizing and things like this. And there were some cases where he even apologized to the teacher because he created a disruption in the class, and he needed to apologize to the teacher too. And maybe take the teacher a little gift and apologize for what he had done in the class and detracting from the lesson or something like that. It was always a discussion, never yelling and hollering, never degrading them as a person, talking about their decisions and how they can improve those decisions.
This improving is actually what I wanted to talk about. The negative, it's not that he has done something bad, but rather him observing his weak spots, let's say, in terms of his chosen sport, in this case football. So he needs to like understand where to and how to build, how to see his own weak. Right now, I'm pointing them out to him through discussion, through always calm. I just like for him to start seeing them and improving.
So the way you do that is like when you take him to practice, right? On your way to practice, you say, okay, son, you're going to have a 1 hour practice with your coaches. As you're practicing, how about you think about the things that you're doing well and the things that you're not doing well? And you and I will talk at the end of your practice to be able to figure out what are the things you're doing well and what are the things you need to improve. Would you like to have that conversation at the end of your practice? Sure, Dad, let's do that. Okay, so think about that as you're practicing today. What are you doing well and what are you doing not well? Right? And he's like, all right, perfect. So then you're sitting there watching his practice, of course. And now at the end of his practice, after he's rested and had some food or whatever it is. Hey, son, is this a good time to talk about, the areas that you're doing well and the areas that you need to improve? Sure, Dad. What do you got? Well, I'm interested in hearing from you. What do you think that you need to improve, and what are the things that you're doing well? And he's going to tell you some things, but he's not going to see everything, right? But he's going to see some of them. So then that's where you come in as a parent, that you're helping him to see things that he's not seeing himself, because he's never going to see everything, because you understand the sport better than he does, right? So he's going to give you 2 or 3 things that he's doing well, or 2 or 3 things that he's not doing well, and now you add in the other ones. So you're like, oh, son, that's really great that you saw this and you saw that and you saw that. That's wonderful. But have you thought about this? And now he's like, no, I haven't thought about that. It's like, yeah, you might think about that. So this is where you're guiding him. Instead of just telling him, you're just kind of like inserting thoughts into his mind that allows him to think and process what it is that you're having to share with him. Yep. And then he builds that skill of looking inward and figuring this stuff out. Yeah. All right, let me see if we have any questions on Facebook or YouTube. All right, I don't see any questions on Facebook or YouTube. All right, so this is everything on this particular topic. It's almost 11 o'clock. So what we could do is we could take a break here, and then we can come back and do like we did on Tuesday, where the information I was going to teach you this afternoon, I can teach it now before lunch, and then we can actually finish and be done probably like around 12 o'clock or 12:15. Does that sound good for you guys? Okay, so why don't we take a 20-minute break? We'll get back together at 11:20, and then I'm going to teach you guys this next topic, which is developing and maintaining relationships, choosing wholesome friends and a life partner. Okay, so we'll start back up at 11:20. Okay.